So, when Canada was a very, very young country, there lived an old woman by the name of Tante Odette. Tante Odette, she was a very careful and quiet woman. She didn't like to spend money. She was really tight-fisted. And on her stove, she had a pot of soup simmering. Some people say that pot of soup had been simmering there for 10 years because every day she'd add a little bit of water, a little bit of cabbage, maybe some salt. That way nothing was wasted. There was always soup to eat. And early in the week, she would always make some bread. And as the week went on, as it got a little bit stale, she'd soften it by dipping it into the soup and eating it. And she had this gray cat, Shoo-Shoo, and Shoo-Shoo was perfectly happy to eat cabbage soup and breadcrumbs. Now every night, after they finished eating, Tante Odette, she'd sit down, she had a big loom, and she'd sit down to weave. And Shoo-Shoo would lay out on the striped rug at her feet. Sometimes she'd sleep, and sometimes she'd just watch Tante Odette working her loom. And on those occasions, Tante Odette would say, "You know, Shoo-Shoo, you are the perfect companion. Although there are times I do wish you could speak." Well, it was just on one such night. Tante Odette had just sat down at the loom, and there was a knocking at the door. And she went over, and she opened the door, and there stood a strange man. He was dressed in a bright red sash, and he had a red checked shirt on. And on his head, he had a black cap with a big feather coming out of it. And on his face, he wore a long mustache that curled at either end. He bowed deeply. He said, "Good evening, madam. My name is Pierre Leblanc, and I'm here looking for work as a laborer." He said, "I'm getting a little too old to trap animals in the woods all winter, and I don't want to work with the younger men in the lumber camps. No, I'm looking for a job in a nice, cozy home just like yours." Well, Tante Odette just looked at him and she said, "I don't need your help. I'm perfectly capable of doing everything myself, me and my cat Shoo-Shoo." And she went to close the door. But Pierre Leblanc, he was very fast. He stuck his hand in the door and he said, "Yes, a very wise-looking cat. Maybe we should ask her what she thinks." Cats don't speak, everybody knows that. And just then, the cat spoke. She said, "Of course I can speak. I've just never had anything important to say before. Now, this Pierre Leblanc, he looks like an honest man and a hard worker. I think you should invite him in." Well, Tante Odette, she just stared at the cat. And then she looked at Pierre Leblanc, and he just smiled, and his mustache kind of quivered. And then he heard Shoo-Shoo say, Well, you know, it's a rare thing for a cat to speak." So she thought, maybe I should listen. So she invited Pierre Leblanc to come into the house. And no sooner had that door closed when his eyes went directly to that pot of soup boiling on the stove. And just then, Shoo-Shoo spoke up again. She said, "Tante Odette, Pierre Leblanc, he looks very hungry. Maybe you should give him some soup." Well, she wasn't really keen on giving anybody anything, but, you know, it's a rare thing for a cat to speak. So she thought, when one does, you should listen. So she gave Pierre a big bowl of soup and a big chunk of bread. And no sooner had he finished eating that soup, Shoo-Shoo spoke again. And she said, "You know, Tante Odette, you should find a place for him to sleep. He looks exhausted." This time she didn't hesitate. She went straight up to the loft. She set out a bed for him, and in a couple of minutes, he was snoring soundly. She came downstairs, and she picked up Shoo-Shoo, and she said, "Imagine, all these years we've been together. I had no idea he could speak." Shoo-Shoo, she just closed her eyes and went to sleep. Well, in the next few weeks, it proved fortuitous that she had listened to Shoo-Shoo's advice, because it turns out that Pierre Leblanc was indeed a very hard worker. He kept the place in tip-top shape. Well, the best thing about all of this, of course, was he was perfectly happy to eat cabbage soup and stale bread. Well, one night, he had just finished eating his soup, and all of a sudden, Shoo-Shoo spoke again. She said, "Tante Odette, why do you only serve cabbage soup and bread to Pierre Leblanc? He's a man, he needs strength, he needs meat pies." "Meat pies? No. Meat pies cost money. No, I don't think that's a good idea." Money, money, money. What good is money? You can't wear money, and you can't eat money or burn money. No, no. The only thing that money is good for is to buy the things that you need. I think you should give Pierre LeBlanc some coins, let him go into town, and he'll come back with the things we need. Well, you know, it's a rare thing for a cat to speak. So, Tante Odette, she gave Pierre LeBlanc some money. And he went into town, and he came back with meats and sweets and other wonderful treats, and soon the pantry was full. And I tell you, Tante Odette, she was a lot happier with the world. Well, a few more weeks had passed, and one day he was out in the forest, Pierre, he was out in the forest cutting some wood, when all of a sudden, a stranger came riding up the road on a horse. And Tante Odette, she went out to meet him, and the closer he got, she realized he looked very much like Pierre LeBlanc. He had the same bright red sash and the same red check shirt, the same hat and a feather, even had the same curly mustache. Well, he pulled up and she said, "Can I help you?" He said, "Tell me, madam, I'm looking for Pierre LeBlanc. Does he live here?" She said, "Yes, yes, this is the place." He said, "Well, you know, Pierre LeBlanc is a very common name. My Pierre LeBlanc, he looks just like me, he dressed just like me." She said, "Yes, yes, that's the man. Still, oh, I know. My Pierre LeBlanc, he can throw his voice." "What do you mean?" "Well, only 1 in 1,000 can do it. He throws his voice, it makes it sound like his voice is coming from a box or from behind a tree. You know, he can even make it sound like somebody else is speaking." Tante Odette said, "Oh, no, no, that's not him. I would never have such a man in my house. I don't like magic." Well, just then, who comes walking up the path with an armload full of wood? Pierre LeBlanc. And when he saw the other man, he said, he dropped the wood and he went up and he gave him a big hug and he said, "How are you?" And the man said, "Pierre, where have you been all summer? I've been looking for you. I want you to come trapping with me in the woods this winter." Well, in a few minutes, the men were sitting down at the table and they were laughing and joking and sharing stories. Tante Odette, she walked over to Shoo Shoo. She said, "I think I've made a mistake. I think Pierre LeBlanc's evil." And Shoo Shoo said, "Don't be ridiculous. Pierre LeBlanc is marvelous. But that man said he can throw his voice." Tante Odette, "I've never seen anybody throw their voice. He's just having fun at your expense. Nobody can do that." Tante Odette, she was so relieved. She walked over and she stood beside Pierre LeBlanc. "You're not thinking of leaving us, are you? You know, if you stay around for a while, I could probably slip you some coins every now and then." Pierre LeBlanc, he stood up and he said, "Madam, it would be my pleasure to stay here to work with you and your very wise cat." He said, "But now I have some wood to pile, so I'll bid you adieu." And off he went. And Tante Odette, she just said, she was so relieved Pierre was not going to be leaving. And as for Shoo Shoo, well, she didn't say a thing.